So he didn't act upon the hadith. So the hadith, you touch, that's like touching any other part of your body. That was Abu Hanifa's ijtihad. So the hadith is not sahih. Although according to hadith standards, or the standards of the scholars of hadith, the hadith is sahih. So that's what the difference. So basically during this time you have scholars who looked for hadith as either acceptable or unacceptable. It wasn't like sahih, hasan, da'if. It was like acceptable or unacceptable. And every acceptable hadith was not always one that had a connected chain all from beginning to end. See? So the murasil, as you mentioned, the hadith where tabi'i attributes something to the Prophet. So the Prophet said this, or he did that. Well, how do you know? You never met him. But Abu Hanifa's opinion was that if it comes from the tabi'in, it doesn't matter. We accept it because they're trustworthy, just like the Sahaba were trustworthy. And Imam Malik was a little different. Imam Malik, he accepted them from we call kibar tabi'in, the senior tabi'in, those who took most of their knowledge from Sahaba. So he accepted mursal hadith from those type. Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal was like Imam Abu Hanifa pretty much. He was like, he accepted the murasil. He was after Shafi'i. But Imam Shafi'i was like, no, we're not accepting mursal hadith. We're not going to accept it. It has to be connected all the way to the end. But then he makes exceptions. He does make exceptions. So for instance, he says, and this is Imam Nawawi mentions in one book in his Taqreed, he says that if a hadith is related by there are two mursal hadiths, two different chains of narration, and both of them are mursal, meaning two different tabi'ins, and they say the Prophet said or did something. And there's one hadith on the same topic which is related, but has a connected chain all the way to the end, and it mentions a Sahabi, and it differs from those other two. Then in this case, Imam Shafi'i says the two mursal hadiths are stronger than the one chain which is connected all the way to the end. So it does make an exception, and sometimes in other areas too. So it's not completely consistent there. But at any rate, that's so there are a number of different considerations involved.
Just to clarify for Sahih, so Imam Shafi'i mainly based it on chain, and the other Imams based it on just if it was a tabi'in who did it, then
they based it on chain, but also they included hadith. They considered it acceptable, a hadith acceptable, even if sometimes it did not have a complete chain, a connection in the chain.
But it didn't matter how many people were in the chain. Right. It was just legitimacy of that person.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And also, and again, Imam Malik would include even if there was no hadith, if there was no hadith at all. So it's like no hadith at all. Then it's like if I'm accepting statements that don't have a hadith to support them at all, then I might as well be accepting hadith that don't have a complete chain. You see, it doesn't make any sense for me to make such a distinction. Yeah. Go ahead.
With respect to how. In terms of weight, juridic weight, how much weight would he ascribe to people doing something or practice compared to something that's written in a book? Like if there's two things that are conflicting, which one weighs heavier in his? Yeah,
Imam Malik, if they're conflicting, then the practice is stronger than the hadith.
Okay.
For Imam Malik, so because by having this understanding that hadith are either acceptable or unacceptable. The understanding also was that a sahih hadith does not produce 100% certainty.
Right.
Like people today, Muslims today think sahih, 100% certainty. No, that's not what it indicates. Unless a hadith is mutawatir. If it's mutawatir, which means that it's been transmitted in the same way that the Quran has been transmitted, then we have 100% certainty. You see, and there's an extreme minority of those hadiths. You see. But other sahih hadiths are not mutawatir, and as a result, they don't produce 100% certainty. They may 80%, sometimes 90%, maybe sometimes 70%, sometimes. You follow me? Mm-hmm. So because of that, when they were in conflict with other principles and sources of law of the different imams that they felt gave greater certainty, they say, well, this hadith gives me 70%, this gives me 75%. So go ahead. If you want the hadith, I'm taking this. And that really was the attitude. So, hadith that says that you shouldn't fast on Fridays. It's in Sahih Muslim. And don't fast on Friday unless you fast the day before or a day after. Right? Okay. So Imam Malik, he said, I found the scholars in Medina fasting on Fridays. Well, siyamuhu hasan. And so it's good to fast on Fridays. And so now some scholars have tried to say, well, Imam Malik didn't know the hadith. Said, well, the context of the statement indicates he did know the hadith. Because why else would he say, I found people fasting on Fridays.
Right.
So he knew that there was an issue with fasting on Fridays. So he said, well, I found the scholars fasting on Fridays, so siyamuhu hasan. So it's good to fast on Fridays.
Was there, in observing people's behavior, did he also have like a means of classifying like which behavior or who amongst the people of Medina are exhibiting this behavior is more solid?
The scholars themselves. You're talking about the scholars of Medina. And most of these were his teachers. Imam Malik had almost like 1,000 sheikhs.
Wow.
Like 1,000. I'm serious. He's that many people he studied with. You see, in his city. So all of these people in this city, and he went and got this knowledge from him, from all of these different people. You see, and so that's what he relied upon. And so, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before Al-Fatiha. Malik, is it part of Fatiha? No. I mean, do you recite it when you pray? No. Why not? Because Medina, the Prophet. No, we never heard this in Medina. In the Prophet's mosque, from the time of the Prophet up until now, nobody has been reported as starting their prayer with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Taslima wahida, one salam, assalamu alaikum, at the end of the prayer. Okay? Are there hadiths? There are a number of hadiths that say that the Prophet did it, the hadiths say the Sahaba did it. What the scholars of hadith say, every single version is weak. All of them are weak. But what the Imam Malik relied upon, he didn't say, I'm not relying on that. In Medina, this is what we do. So, it is the sunnah to give salam one time at the end of the prayer. So that's the way it worked. So,
two quick questions. At the same time, this issue where Imam Malik, for example, like you mentioned before, the thing between qabd and sadr, right? Imam Malik in Muwatta, he related to the hadith about qabd. But the mashhur of the school is sadr, right?
Right.
So what about?
As a hadith scholar, which Imam Malik was, he reported anything that he believes was related by a trustworthy narrator. See, but just simply because he related a hadith in his Muwatta by a narrator who is trustworthy doesn't mean that he acted upon it. He also relates in the Muwatta the hadith about the man who gave a woman an iron ring for her dowry. Or the hadith that a man who was married to a woman to teach her on the basis of teaching her some Quran. But what is Imam Malik's position? You can't give an iron ring as a dowry. Quran, you can't teach, that's not a valid dowry to teach a person Quran. But he mentions it in his Muwatta, you see. Why? Because he's looking at what? He's looking at, okay, I know, trying to think of someone from a different city, one of the Tabi'in. I'm familiar with Hassan al-Basri. I know him, for instance. Yeah, he's trustworthy. So he relates to hadith. I read he relates to hadith, but he's trustworthy. That's just about being a fair and just scholar. And anytime Imam Malik, over a period of 40 years, felt that a hadith may not have been authentic, he removed it. You see, he took it out of his book. You see.
And the other question is, can you shed some light on this saying the Qira'ah of Nafi is Sunnah?
It's Sunnah.
Yeah.
Well, saying it is Sunnah is to say that it is the Qira'ah of Medina.
Okay.
Because Sunnah with the Malikis, sometimes it reflects on the Sunnah of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then sometimes it's the Sunnah of the Fuqaha of Medina. So much so that you find statements like, we don't do this, we don't do it because it goes against the Sunnah.